Oh boy, you have no idea how excited I am to finally get to this game on the retro review list. I'll warn you now, there's gonna be some heavy bias on this one, but I implore you to stick around as I try to sell this one to you. So mix yourself a tonic and huddle up to the campfire as we take a journey into the Super Nintendo gem known as Final Fantasy V. Released at the tail end of 1992 in Japan, this title wouldn't make it outside of the region for 7 years. It was only until the PlayStation era where it was included in 1999's Final Fantasy Anthology in North America, and then later in 2002 in Europe. It wasn't for lack of trying though. Squaresoft made multiple attempts at translating the game, but those short-lived attempts would get cancelled on the grounds that the game was just too complex for audiences outside of Japan. As much a shame as that was, I get it. Final Fantasy IV had to be dumbed down for international release, and Square even made an entry-level RPG specifically targeted at the North American audience, called Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, which I also have a retro review of on my channel, just saying. Needless to say, the small, hardcore Final Fantasy crowd in North America were not happy with this, and after multiple delays, they took it upon themselves to translate the game and release a fan translation online. It wasn't without its faults and mistranslations, but history has shown that it was in fact a superior translation compared to the official Final Fantasy Anthology port. The PlayStation version was marred with disjointed story translation, terrible load times which included every battle transition, and even the pirate-heavy dialogue for Faris was just too much. For many, the fan translation was their first taste of Final Fantasy V, myself included. When you fire up the game, the title will slide up on a simple black screen with blue and white accents, but the letters will quickly transition to being a window into a panning mountain and field background. Here we see the game's main protagonist, Bartz, riding his trusty chocobo steed, Boko, across the scenery. This establishing Bartz as a wanderer, as well as the theme of Final Fantasy V being that of a grand adventure. If you have a saved game, then you'll be taken to a file selection screen that also includes the option for a new game. But with no save data present, the game will go straight into its intro movie, setting the stage for things to come. As dawn breaks over the Kingdom of Tycoon's castle, a pink-haired princess sees her father take off on their dragon to inspect suspicious activity at the Shrine of the Wind Crystal. Meanwhile, we see a purple-haired pirate captain notice that the winds have suddenly died. Elsewhere, an elderly man bemoans that he may be too late, but for what? We don't know. And as the king arrives at the Wind Shrine, the Wind Crystal shatters! All the while, our hero Bartz is enjoying the warmth of a campfire in the forest, which is suddenly interrupted by a crashing meteor of all things. As he goes to check it out, he encounters the pink-haired princess being accosted by goblins. After saving her, she introduces herself as Lenna, but does not let on about her royal standing. At the same time, the elderly man was discovered by the pair laying by the meteor. Suffering from a case of amnesia, he can only recall his name as Galuf, and that he is supposed to go to the Wind Shrine. As the story unfolds, the trio eventually cross paths with the purple-haired pirate captain, who reveals their name as Faris. Further along the way, the four heroes join forces to inspect what happened at the Wind Shrine, only to find out that the Wind Crystal lay in shards, and that the 3 other crystals are in danger of shattering as well. They must hurry to save the world's life sources, but not before the Wind Crystal shards lends the party their powers, allowing the 4 to use skills and strengths to aid them in their adventure. As far as the plot goes, I will admit that it starts off and continues as something not very revolutionary, and compared to its other Final Fantasy brethren, pretty basic once all things shake out. It's my personal opinion though, that this simple plot was really a great way to lighten the mood, as this was intended to be a more lighthearted adventure, but still with epic events and stakes. And especially as gaming and media continued, there have been a plethora of moody, brooding characters that just got old from overexposure. I love that these characters felt like they could save the world, but sit for a pint afterwards. The core gameplay of this 5th entry was similar to that of its predecessors. Playing like a typical JRPG of the time, you control your heroes on an adventure, moving around to navigate dungeons, solve puzzles, find secrets, and loot chests and secret items. When walking around anywhere other than a safe town or castle, you will face random encounters with monsters and a handful of brigands. Transitioning to a battle screen, the combat is turn-based as participants await their turns for action. The active time battle system returns from Final Fantasy IV. However, this time you actually get to see the action bar of your party as it fills. Once filled, a party member can make selections and act. As the game goes on, you will gain access to magics, items, and abilities that'll make this faster, sometimes being able to take 2 turns before the enemies can even blink. Much as jrpgs go to, combat is more than just attacking and taking damage. More abilities and commands will unlock as you progress, which will be different ways to attack enemies, heal allies, or even mess with the enemies in different ways. Now, where Final Fantasy V really shines and had set itself apart from the pack was the return and refinement of the job system. First introduced in the Japan-exclusive Final Fantasy III, the job system allowed you to change the class of your party members throughout the journey, as opposed to choosing and sticking with the jobs assigned to them at the beginning of Final Fantasy I. The way it worked in Final Fantasy III, however, was that while you could change the job, that's basically where it ended. You get a knight, or a mage, or a thief, and they only do what their job is capable of doing. That's it. Now, here in Final Fantasy V, not only could you change jobs, not only were you able to have access to stats and abilities of said jobs, but you could have their characters grow their jobs, learn those jobs' abilities, and apply them to other jobs they would inhabit. You want a monk that can cast white magic? You can do that. You want a dragoon that can dual-wield powerful lances? You can do that. You want a knight that can tank hits and have HP boosted beyond the job's limit? You can do that. With 22 available jobs, all with an average of about 6 abilities each, the potential combination reaches into the thousands. Some combos are more powerful than others, with other combos being downright useless, but anyone willing to take the time to grow the jobs and experiment with combinations can come across some seriously game-breaking mixes that can make you feel like a god as you take on the typical Final Fantasy god villains. This game also introduced a plethora of concepts and features that would continue to show up in future Final Fantasy titles, all the way up to today and beyond. It was the series' first use of ability points gained from combat along with the standard experience points. The first time you could cross-class abilities and traits. The introduction of jobs like the Blue Mage, Time Mage, Mystic Knight, Samurai, Chemist, Dancer, Ranger, and Mime. The first time characters had a dedicated equipment slot for accessories. And of course, the introduction of the multi-dimensional hopping character Gilgamesh, who very near canonically can be seen as the exact same Gilgamesh you encounter in all the other Final Fantasies. But we'll leave that theorizing for some other day. With the improved job system, Final Fantasy V allowed for major flexibility in party composition, and a unique experience each time you played the game, if you wished. The wonder of what ability will I learn next keeps players invested, along with the unfolding of the plot that didn't take itself too seriously, but still had twists and turns to it. There's a lot more to the plot and the job system that I haven't really touched on here, but that's because it is so much more fun to see it all for yourself. The gameplay of Final Fantasy V gets a 10 out of 10. While the prior entry of Final Fantasy IV was a major visual improvement over its NES predecessors, it was originally intended to be released on the flagship console, so its visuals were very much made for an older system that just got ported and touched up on the Super Nintendo. Final Fantasy V, though, really cranked up the potential of Nintendo's second home machine. Colors are vibrant, but not cartoony. They could range from bright to desaturated, depending on where you were or the mood of the plot. This game took full advantage of the SNES's ability to display 256 colors at once, allowing for shading and highlighting on as big or as small a scale as Squaresoft wanted. The title screen purposely kept itself simple at first, but then popped out the colors and use of Mode 7 features on the SNES. And as soon as you go into the game's intro, you're treated to a beautifully rendered castle and environment. And the backgrounds didn't stop there. Most of the game's environments are packed with details. You may notice, though, that the battle backgrounds do tend to look a bit more on the simplistic style. But looking closer, it's only the battle area that looks like that, while the upper portion still has great environment renderings. This was very likely on purpose, as to not have enemies and player models blend too badly into much more details. There was also this thing about being in buildings and dungeons where smaller pockets of rooms would be visible, but it was very much black surrounding them. This gave a feeling of tightness, as these rooms really should feel smaller in comparison to open air. That said, when dungeons didn't do that, the grand scale of the area could be felt. The character sprite models were a massive improvement over the prior entries. They were still in a chibi style, but the designers started playing around with their available pixel real estate by adding in a lot more expressions that helped portray emotions of the characters. Not only in the main protagonists, but even non-playable characters were treated to this visual improvement, especially used in plot points or cute little skits peppered around towns, some even hinting at secret item side quests. In combat, the main four have bigger and more detailed models, and while expressions were not important in this area, there was a lot of room for movements and visual identifiers of status effects. Since the job system allowed for cross-class abilities, the character movements associated with those moves were also available to the models to have access to. And as impressive as that is alone, multiply that by the number of playable characters. Then, further multiply that by the 22 jobs that this game offers. Every job had a different costume for each character, and it wasn't just generic same modeling either. Each job model of each character combined the design of the job with the personality and vibe of the character. Take the Black Mage job for example. Bartz and Galuf both had puffy pants and cowl capes to go with the pointed hat and hidden face aesthetic of the Black Mage. But between the two, Galuf's pants was more desaturated green, while Bartz's was a bright blue and yellow. Bartz's hat had a crescent moon on it, while Galuf's didn't. Galuf did, however, have the extra touch of his mustache poking over the covered face of Black Mage fame. And then you have Lenna and Faris, both instead having a smooth draped robe over them, but Lenna's being of a slimmer build, while Faris's is bulkier. Their individual hair pokes out of the hat, and their pendants are different. These were all subtle details, but still took a lot of painstaking design work to differentiate them from each other, while still representing the same job. Now, if that was too subtle for you, we also have major design changes on jobs like the Berserker or the Ninja. There's just too much to go on about, but if you want to see a video that dives deeper into these designs, let me know in the comments. And hit subscribe while you're at it too, wink wink. Now, we haven't even touched on the enemy models yet. Once again, designed by Squaresoft legend Yoshitaka Amano, but also assisted by soon-to-be legend Tetsuya Nomura. Both will have their works translated into pixel form by yet another legend, Kazuko Shibuya, allowing the designs to fit into an appealing but limited pixel space. As in the past, the enemy sprites ranged from cute to imposing, especially boss sprites trying to loom over the party. So many little details got translated into pixel form very acutely. True to Squaresoft form, they spared no expense in pushing the Super Nintendo's visual capabilities, as well as the manpower needed to design so many variations of the characters' battle sprites. If you thought Final Fantasy VI's expressions were top tier, just remember that Final Fantasy V got the ball rolling splendidly on that beforehand. And as usual, backgrounds and environments, even in pixel form, can at times be awe-inspiring. The graphics of Final Fantasy V get a 10 out of 10. The very first track that you're treated to is this game's main theme song that gets various renditions throughout the game. It's a fun, triumphant, and adventurous tune that evokes the exact lighthearted tone suitable for the plot to come. And yet, showing the versatility of this game, the intro then starts off somber and takes us on a roller coaster of emotions to match the various scenes that we go through, climaxing at a devastating point, yet returning to that somber rendition of the main theme as we return to Bartz's perspective. The main theme also has an overworld rendition that you'll hear very often, really solidifying its status in the game. Shortly after, you're also introduced to the game's Hurry Up theme, which is just a repeating cacophony of guitar, drums, and bells at such a speed that it's intended to make the player panic a bit. A lot of town songs in the early game evoke a sense of serene and calm despite the looming threat to the world. But there's one in particular that's a major standout to me. Keeping the theme of lighthearted adventure, this theme is an Irish jig that makes things feel like a happy celebration, kind of unique in a lot of RPGs that I've played, really. Many of the early dungeons have their own theme songs, enough to make you think that every dungeon has its own unique one throughout the game. But eventually, many dungeons do start sharing the same theme. But to have had so many tracks to be so unique from each other for as long as it did was just a further testament to Squaresoft's focus on producing a versatile and thorough experience. One of the themes that just tingles my ears, admittedly mainly due to nostalgia, is the game's first dungeon cave. It's a short weaving of tunnels, but the amount of time I spent grinding in there allowed me to really pick up on the subtle details of the song. Nearly as serene as a town, yet still giving off vibes of adventure and looming danger. This is the first area that you have random encounters after all, so the music is really just telling you, don't panic, but don't let your guard down. Now, as much as I love this game, I will be the first to admit that Final Fantasy V's main battle theme is maybe okay at best. This whole lighthearted theme may not carry over so well into every aspect of the game. I find that it doesn't evoke enough of a pressure sense when facing off against an aggressive foe. Don't get me wrong, it's not like I bemoan hearing it when I grind my way through the game. I just need to be more practical in criticizing one of my favorite games and call them as I see them. Could I do with a different tune here? Absolutely not, as the song still fits perfectly well with the game. But let's talk the boss music. In the first few years of my having played and replaying this game, the boss battle theme sounded generic and overall pretty meh, especially when compared to all the other Final Fantasy boss themes. It wasn't until later on, as my musical sensibilities grew, that I realized how fitting this theme was for this game. Sure, its intro may be trying a bit too hard to impose itself on you, but the continuation does follow a sense of pressure and danger to it, all the while still holding firm onto the adventurous tone of the game. Now, we can't talk about Final Fantasy V's music without at least making mention of the classic tune titled Battle on the Big Bridge. As I mentioned before about the recurring character Gilgamesh, he also would have the tune follow him from game to game, getting multiple renditions to suit the soundtrack of said games. As the head composer of this game, it's almost like the legendary Nobuo Uematsu already knew what was to come for Gilgamesh's legacy, because the song almost felt like it came out of left field, charging up with a rock organ, guitars, drums, and carried with trumpets. It was like nothing we heard in the game up until this point, but it was awesome. It's so high energy that the developers decided to have it play throughout the entirety of the player's rush across a massive bridge system, both in the map and during battle, even through a direct clash with Gilgamesh himself, too. It's not until some years later that fans realized that this was the beginning of seeing the famed composer's core musical tastes. If you go listen to the music of his rock band, the Black Mages, then this track, you'll get it. Now, as far as sound effects go, it's mainly standard fare. There is of course the iconic pointer movement sound from prior Final Fantasies, and then you have sword swipes, punches, magic power-ups, and elemental attacks, to name a few. The click of a treasure chest opening is satisfying, and a subtle confirmation sound when you find a secret item is just as tingly to the brain. Some of the sounds can get a bit jarring, possibly ill-fitting to some. It's a section of the game that maybe didn't have as much attention paid to it, but everything still works. And of course, for me, all the sounds are quite nostalgic. Something I had noticed though, is that I never really heard any of these sound effects from any other game sound quite like the ones here in Final Fantasy V. It's possibly a testament to the fact that the sound effects did get handcrafted specifically for this project, and they kept it solely for this entry alone. As far as artistry goes, that's a very fine touch that I can appreciate. The music and sound of Final Fantasy V gets a 10 out of 10. Oh, you thought you reached the shortest section of these retro reviews? Buckle in, hotshot, it's gonna be a long one. So considering that Final Fantasy V didn't release outside of Japan until 1999, I obviously didn't have a chance to experience the game closer to its release year of 1992. Heck, we had already moved on to the next generation of home consoles, but even back then, I actually wasn't much into RPGs at the time, so who's to say if I even would have played it then? Like a lot of the outside of Japan crowd, my first true Final Fantasy experience was Final Fantasy VII, but it was the PC release from 1998. It of course sparked the jrpg bug in me, and I felt the need to find more. Thanks to the beauty of online emulation, I was able to find them easily. I touched on so many English releases, but also a few Japan exclusives. Of course, I couldn't read the Japanese text, but fans of those games would put in the coding and work to translate them, since the developers didn't care to. definitely came across some gems, but of course, I finally decided I should scope out the prior Final Fantasies considering I enjoyed 7 and 8 so much. And then, it finally happened. I loaded up the fan translation of Final Fantasy V, and the rest is history. When I started the game, it was maybe a month left in summer holidays, and it had me hooked right from the get-go. Every reason I've mentioned thus far to try this game is what kept me so interested in it. Even when my family planned a trip out to Whistler, BC too, I loaded this game onto my laptop to keep it up. I have some great downtime memories hanging out in an Alpine-inspired rental as I kept plugging away at the game's plot with some grinding for those sweet, sweet abilities. Much as I was playing this game though, something distracted me away from it, and I never actually completed the game. I don't even know where I stopped. As the years went on, I would restart playing this game on some boredom downtime, or even airplane rides, but I just kept getting distracted to other things. It wasn't from boredom or anything, as I always enjoyed starting this one from the beginning every time. But alas, completing the game still wasn't achieved. Fast forward some time into the early 2010s, and I was living solo in my condo. I had just treated myself to a new computer, so I took the old one and hooked it up to my TV as a media center, and of course, some big screen gaming. What should I feel like playing but this gem? I did realize that I never completed the game, so I was on a mission to do so. And do so I did. It was a great time of freedom from distractions, and I finally enjoyed completing the game. And as we move ahead in time again, in 2021, the pixel remasters of the first 6 Final Fantasy games was released. And so, I enacted a goal to play every main Final Fantasy game on my Twitch channel. So in 2022, I purchased the pack and eventually got to Final Fantasy V. Of course, I played it to completion, but also something I achieved that I never had before was mastering every single job on every character. Needless to say, I have many great memories involving Final Fantasy V, which further solidifies it as my absolute favorite Final Fantasy game to this day. Well, that and Final Fantasy Tactics, which I find keeps swapping back and forth in my mind. The nostalgia hit of Final Fantasy V gets a 10 out of 10. With every iteration of the Final Fantasy series, Squaresoft kept trying new systems as well as improving on old ones. What started out as a way to have versatility in your party composition in Final Fantasy III's job system got further refined here in Final Fantasy V, where Final Fantasy III's system did at times railroad you into using specific jobs during story quests. Final Fantasy V allowed you to play through the story in whatever manner you wanted to, so long as you knew how to survive with it. Only very special situations and quests would make you focus on a specific job, but even then, you still had versatility of being able to bring skills and abilities over to any job you choose. The refinement wouldn't stop there, of course. Future games like the Final Fantasy Tactics series, pre-Stormblood Final Fantasy XIV, and the Bravely Default series would make the system return over the years, and even improve on it. But with Final Fantasy V being so versatile and chock full of content in its leveling system alone was game-changing in the early 90s. I definitely feel that it was a crying shame that this game never made it out of Japan until 7 years later. And even then, the PlayStation experience was terrible. But in 2006, the developers redeemed the game with Final Fantasy V Advance on the Game Boy Advance. It came with slightly updated audio and visuals, along with a new post-game dungeon and 4 new jobs, plus massively improved load times and translation over the Final Fantasy Anthology version. But if I were to recommend any version to play in this day and age, it would be the Pixel Remaster, available on PC and all the consoles. It's a true to the original port with extremely improved audio and visuals, plus some great quality of life upgrades, like a speedy auto battle option and being able to sprint no matter what job you were, just to name a few. It doesn't come with the extras from the GBA version though, but personally, I was totally fine with that, to be honest. I'm a terrible purist sometimes, and if you ever have the ability to, it's still so charming to play the original SNES version. I consider this game to be the last true Final Fantasy adventure before the series started to drown in drama tropes. With its lighthearted story, supreme leveling job system, and its charming presentation, Final Fantasy V is a top-tier, must-play RPG for any fan of the genre, and still a massive recommendation from me to anyone else to try.